Mining and Outdoor Recreation Committee to order. Let's see, the minutes. Representative Dill, would you care to move the minutes? Yep. Representative Dill moves the minutes. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, motion prevails. Minutes are adopted. A number of bills to get through today, members. We're going to come back later this evening. 6:15? 6:15 and 300 South. Hope to get through everything except the game and fish bill. We will do the game and fish bill tonight starting at 6:15. Hopefully we can get through the rest of the agenda before we have to come back tonight. So with that, Representative Lueck moves House File 1186. Representative Lueck, where does the bill have to go next?
Mr. Chair, thank you for the hearing. It would go to Jobs, Growth, Energy, and Affordability Policy
And that is your motion.
Yes, sir.
Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. 1186, some would say it's a technical adjustment. What we've got is a situation where technology may, in some cases, have overtaken specific things within the trades. This would provide a specific company, U.S. Steel, with a situation that's very similar to our co-ops out there, our electrical power companies. My background, naval shipyards, even at the county level, where they would have the opportunity with the bargaining unit that's involved with that particular company to have some flexibility in how they qualify, their technical people and how they be treated under the regulations we have for a variety of things. In particular, one will come to mind, and we'll hear testimony on, I'm sure, on licensing electricians. But what I'd like to do, we've got some experts on this that would like to turn it over for testimony here that can give you a little more detail. I guess Mr. Peter Coyle would like to start it off.
Welcome to the committee. Please state your name and who you represent for the record.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. My name is Peter Coyle of Larkin Hoffman, and I represent United States Steel. I'm going to be joined in the testimony today by Dan Pierce, who's the president of USW Local 2660, and also by John Scooby, who's the general manager of human relations for U.S. Steel up on the range. Just as a premise to the bill, members and Mr. Chairman, the bill is applicable broadly to the mining industry. It's not specific to one company. I want to make sure you're clear about that. And secondly, what we're attempting to do by the bill is to try to align the regulatory structure for electricians and electrical services that are provided within mining companies to an exemption that already exists in law for the inspections of that work. And all the inspections are handled through the federal government, through the Mine Safety Administration. The licensing process for electricians, though, is still handled through the state of Minnesota. The second point, then, is there are a number of exemptions to the licensing statute that are already established in statute, starting with, for example, utility companies. So this is not a unique concept that we're proposing today, but it really patterns itself on other exemptions that have been granted. And then thirdly, the language that's before you today was vetted with the Department of Labor and Industry. I'm not aware that they have any opposition to the language, and to the contrary, they've indicated that the language is acceptable to them. So I just offer that to you. And with that, Dan, do you want to go ahead?
Dan Pierce. Good afternoon. My name is Dan Pierce. I'm a steel worker from United Tacker, Keewatin Taconite, and I'm also the president. I'm here today in support of our electrical members. The mining company has been exempt from these inspections for over 120 years. As you all know, that we also do have MSHA come in twice a year, and they're there for multiple months per their inspections. They have full support of our local and the company. They have authorization to inspect any areas on the property as they seem fit. So we also do have the county inspectors also coming in and doing their inspections to look at our facility also. And we also have our own members and management doing inspections in areas to make sure everyone is safe. The USW and US Steel work together to ensure our electrical workers are safe. Each year, we send our electrical members to the National Electric Code class. That is basically a class that gets all our electricians up to speed on new codes or existing codes that may have changed. So each one of our electricians at both facilities go to that class. The company encourages our members to get their license for journeyman and master electricians status by providing the training at no extra cost to the employee. Each member has his or her own hours signed off and sent into the state. As a union president and a member of the USW, I'd like to see this practice continue for the next 20 years. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. John? Please state your name and who you represent for the record.
My name is John Scooby. I'm the Director of Human Resources for U.S. Steel's Minnesota Ore Operations in northeastern Minnesota.
Please proceed.
Chairman Hackber, thank you for the opportunity to present these important points. This particular change in the statute is important to U.S. Steel. Mining companies, like my colleague Dan mentioned, since 1990 have enjoyed an exemption from inspections with respect to the electrical statutes. Like Dan was saying, the MSHA, Mine Safety and Health Administration, is on our property the majority of the year, inspecting our work, inspecting the safety of our facilities, along with the county mine inspector. There's no doubt that we do the electric work safely and the way it's supposed to be done. The state licensing requirements that are presently in the statute that insists that the company be registered as a electrical employer. In addition, all electrical workers are required to be registered as unlicensed, at least as unlicensed electricians. This triggers a degree of administration oversight that is unrealistic in our industry. Fulfilling those statute requirements is very difficult and challenging given the large footprint of our operation. We have three huge plant buildings, over 150 electricians at Minnesota Ore, and the supervisory requirements and the requirements that this present statute requires that is very cumbersome and is very challenging. Like Mr. Coyle said, a number of industries have already received exemptions from this language, in particular the utilities industry. There should be no question as far as U.S. Steel's commitment to safety. Both the steelworkers and U.S. Steel have been totally committed to safety. It would never put anything in the way of returning our employees safely to home. Before we even agreed to venture towards getting this adjustment made to the statute, this local steelworker union and the company made a pretty impressive agreement. Number one, first recognizing that having master electricians and journeyman electricians licensed on the property was a good thing. And both the company and the union support that wholeheartedly. In addition, the company has verified has committed to verify those hours worked by our electricians so as to qualify them for license status, whether it be journeyman, whether it be a master status, if those employees would wish to go on and become licensed. In addition, we've agreed to reimburse any test fees or registration fees that the employees would be faced with to become licensed. And finally, like Dan had mentioned, we already offer electric code classes, and we had agreed with the union contingent upon all this, this legislation hopefully going through, that we would continue offering that type of education and training to our employees. We think this would be a good, healthy change to the existing statute. And by the way, I just wanted to mention that we have also been negotiating with IBEW to iron out any differences we may have in the proposed language. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, that concludes our testimony. We'd be happy to take questions if you have any for us at this time.
Very good. At this time, we'll take Representative Lueck's amendment to get the bill in the shape that he'd like, the H1186A1. All in favor of that amendment signify by saying aye. 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 All opposed, motion prevails. Amendment's adopted. Anything else, Representative Lueck, before we take testimony or questions from the members?
No, Mr. Chairman. Glad to
Questions,
take
members?
testimony.
Seeing no questions, anyone in the audience that would like to speak for or against the bill as amended? Please come on down. Welcome to the committee. Please state your name and who you represent for the record.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, my name is Bill Haney, Legislative Director for IBEW, Minnesota State Council. When we first became aware of the bill, we looked at it and we had a number of concerns with it. Felt it was somewhat overreaching for what they were trying to do. Had several discussions since that time with talked to the author and talked to some other legislators on it, and a couple of times with U.S. Steel as well. And we will continue to do that. We're not here to oppose the bill. We're just here to let you know that we're very concerned about it, as are the union contractors with National Electrical Association, as well as the non-union electrical contractors with the Minnesota Electrical Association. And we'll hopefully work out the issues we have with it before the next meeting. If not, then we'll have to decide on what course we're going to take. I just want to highlight a couple things for you. Our big concern is to maintain the integrity that exists in statute today for of the electrician's license. There's a process there that people are to follow to get that license, and you can go through an accredited apprenticeship program for 4 years and meet the requirements that way. I know that the utility exemption from licensing was mentioned, but they also have an accredited apprenticeship program there. Once a person is licensed, whether they go through one of our programs, get their experience at the mine, and they're hours certified, sit for the exam, pass the exam, they can go work anywhere, including your house. And you want to be sure that once a person is a licensed electrician, they really know what they're doing. They pass the test, but they've retained all that they've learned about electrical theory and about the hands-on of how to do things. The testifiers were from one company and talked about what they will do or are doing, and what they've worked out with steelworkers local up there. The bill applies to all companies, and I don't know what their commitments are to their workers, whether there's some with contracts, some without, and what those companies will do on training and whatnot as well. So we'll keep you posted, Mr. Chair.
Very good. Representative Uruso. Representative Uruso, you have a question?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This one engineer asking a question about another engineer field. Are electrical engineers generally allowed to do electrical work that otherwise electricians do?
I don't, no. They're not generally allowed to know they,
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Urissa.
For instance, chemical engineers know a lot about plumbing, but I wouldn't be allowed to go and do plumbing in people's houses, because what I don't know is the how to do it right, you know, on the joints and all of that, okay? I know how to do lots of calculations and everything. So I have a similar concern about this, and that's why I'm asking. So I don't know, I'm sure, I don't know where the phrase came from and everything, so I don't know the background on why it says the work certified by a master electrician or an electrical engineer. So that's what I'm curious about there. And, yeah. So I'd like some information about whether that's generally acceptable. Not saying it's not, raise the question.
Say,
Mr.
Mr.
Coyle.
Coyle may be able to answer
Mr. Coyle?
that specifically.
Mr. Coyle?
Mr. Chair, Representative, it's a great question. In statute currently, electrical engineers are allowed to vouch for the work that's performed by people on their staff who are doing electrical work. This bill would not change that. In fact, we're trying to preserve the ability for the employees of a mining company to be licensed and have their time certified by either the master or, if they have an electrical engineer on staff, that person. And the delete all narrowed the scope of the original bill to clarify that it was only those two people. Thank you.
Representative Urissa.
That's all, thanks, Mr. Chair.
Representative Enzel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members, please don't miss what the intent of this language is. Mining companies are signatory with United Steelworkers of America and Industrial Union. The mine where the steelworkers work is the employer. And terms and conditions of employment and pay grades are established by the bargaining unit. And the position of electrician is usually the highest pay grade in the mine. And those are workers employed by the employer who perform electrical work, who are trained to do electrical work, whose work is overseen and managed and directed by a master electrician. Now, those work rules, in varying degrees from mine to mine, allow certain functions, certain work duties to be performed by contractors who are not employees of the mining company. And these electrical contractors are always signatory to the IBEW. And those workers perform major electrical functions at the mine that the company chooses to contract for. What we're doing here is, in my view, is solidifying, firming up, clarifying what is permissible in Minnesota for an industrial union and their employer. The question of inspections and safety keeps coming up. And I can assure members that whether it's the mine inspector program that has been in place with Iron Range counties for over 75 years, or if it's the Federal Mine Safety and Health Administration, there is more than adequate inspection of the work in a healthy way. So I just want to caution members not to make this a more complicated issue than it needs to be. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chair, just in response, we're not raising inspection at all and haven't. I think that your statements, Representative, on the oversight by masters on the property may be a little off, but that's not what we're talking about here today either. We're hoping we can resolve things so that the individuals involved can get their hours certified and sit for the exam. What we did raise as some concerns were just to maintain the integrity of the training and the process that people go through to become eligible to sit for the exam. So once, should they pass, they're licensed, that you and I can have confidence in their work in our homes. And that's really, really important. That's it.
Well, Mr. Chairman, we're not talking about residential electrical work. We're talking about the function of performing electrical work, most often maintenance, in an industrial setting.
Mr. Chair, Representative, we are talking about residential work. A person working at the mine, once they're a licensed electrician, they get laid off, they quit, get fired, whatever, can take that license, it's a shingle, and they can go out and work for an electrical contractor that you or I may contact and have work done in our home. So we're not talking about, while they're working for the mining company, but if they leave there, and people change jobs a lot, and that's one of the reasons why we feel it's so important to maintain the integrity of the license and the experience. And the work with the bill, the work that would be allowed, at the mining company is any work, that's covered by the federal exemption. The word, what was that word in there? Incidental in the bill is, to me, it's a very broad word, and we're trying to work with the company to tie it back to the federal statute, so that it only applies, to the parts of the mine that are covered by their exemption. So,
Representative Ansel?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm done.
Members, I've got 5 more members that would like to speak to this issue. It is a very important issue, but we've got a number of bills to get through, some controversial issues to get done. We're going to be back tonight again. I don't want to come back here tomorrow night or Friday or any night next week, but we can if we have to. Representative McNamara. Oh, I'm sorry, Representative Lane.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and not a question, just a brief comment. I appreciate that IBEW and the companies and the steelworkers are all working together in good faith to find some common ground on this language. And, I do plan to support it today, and I hope we can pass it out of committee. And doing that, though, knowing that you're going to continue to work together to try to meet some middle ground. So I do appreciate that you're continuing the conversations. So, thank you.
Great comments. Thank you. Representative McNamara.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to go back to Representative Urusso's comments, and Mr. Haney, you made some statements about electrical engineering. I just want to be sure. I thought that if you had an electrical engineering degree, that had some credence in your electrical license and or your master electrician. And I thought even when you did phone a friend, you said that was not true. That's not the way I remember it. And I just want to know, because we're using electrical engineer here. I'm just hopeful that as this moves forward, we could clarify. I thought there was a role that an electrical engineering degree played in electrician and master electrician determination.
Mr. Chair, Representative, the use here, I believe, is consistent with current statute, and I believe that electrical engineer is used throughout the statute in that way. for this purpose or for contractor license and that sort of thing.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. And Mr. Haney, I just wanted to clarify, because I thought in your answer to Representative Urusso, you said, no, there's no standing for electrical engineer. They'd be just like a person off the street
I don't-
starting.
My-
Maybe I misunderstood what you said.
Mr. Chair, my understanding, Representative, is that they aren't allowed, they aren't covered to do the wiring. But, you know, which is what Representative Russo's point was.
Okay, thank you.
Representative Russo.
No.
Representative Johnson.
Mr. Chair, the question I have is going back to a little bit to the testing of, to be an electrician. The work that these individuals will do in the mine would probably be, more than likely be different than in a residential, the way I understand it. But they're still getting knowledge on electrical work and doing that, and doing some of the work and being overseen by master electricians to make sure the work is done properly. But if these individuals want to continue their training and take their test to be a licensed electrician, would these people be taking the same test as everybody else, or is there a separate test for industrial and a separate test for residential?
Mr. Chair, Representative, it's all the same test.
So Mr. Chair, so in other words, in order to pass this test, they would need to know that stuff ahead of time, so if they were going to go out and do residential work, if they choose to leave, they would have the knowledge to pass the test just like anybody else.
Mr. Chair, Representative, that's correct.
Thank you.
Representative Russo.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just like to point out that, you know, we have written tests, but in trades like this, we don't rely on book learning alone. And so that's why the certification of ours is important. Thank you.
Anyone else in the audience like to speak for or against the bill? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Seeing none, Representative Lueck renews his motion that House File 1186 be re-referred to the Committee on Job, where is it now? I had it here.
Jobs, growth, energy, affordability,
That's
policy,
his
and finance
motion.
committee.
All in favor of that motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion prevails.
Thank you, Mr.
Bill is
Chair.
passed on. Thank you very much. Representative McNamara. Representative McNamara moves House File 1329. And Representative McNamara, we're going to refer this to your committee, Environment, Policy, and Finance.
Yes, Mr. Chair, my motion would be to move House File 1329 to the House Environment Policy Finance Committee.
That would be your motion, and to get the bill in the shape that you'd like to move the DE1 amendment.
Mr. Chair, I would like to move the DE1 to get the bill in the shape the author would like.
All in favor of that motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, motion prevails. The amendment is adopted. Representative McNamara, to your bill, as amended.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like Assistant Commissioner Meyer to walk through the bill.
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner
members
Meyer.
of the record, Bob Meyer, Assistant Commissioner, Department of Natural Resources. House File 1329 with the delete all amendment is the department's policy and technical bill. We have taken out several provisions in this bill, and you'll be seeing them tonight in the delete all amendment on the game and fish bill to expedite another hearing on this bill for the state and local government dealing with rulemaking. Most of the issues in this bill are fairly non-controversial and a lot of consensus. There's also some amendments in the DE that we've been working with members on, Representative Lueck, Representative Dill, and other folks to address some of the concerns in their districts. Going through the DE, Mr. Chair, members, I'm going to try to go through this relatively quickly. If we have specific questions, I do have staff in the audience to answer those questions. So sections 1, 2, and 3 of the bill make a change, and actually sections 1, 2, and 3 make a change requiring the purchaser of an ATV or snowmobile to be required for the transferring of the title rather than the seller. So you'll see the language basically on 1.11, it says the purchaser is subject to penalties if they don't transfer the ownership. Currently, if you sell an ATV or snowmobile, the onus is on you to have that title transferred. We want it to be like boats and cars and everything else like that. So that's the first three sections of the bill. Sections 4, 5, 6 deal with some conversations that we've had over the interim with the All-Terrain Vehicle Association of America, Polaris, of Minnesota, I should say, Polaris, Yamaha, Bombardier, other stakeholder groups dealing with ATVs. It deals with clarification of the definitions of these machines as we move forward. You can see the Class 1 now, rather than a weight, we've been changing these weights for the past decade as these machines evolve and they sell different types of machines to people. So a Class 1 machine will actually be 50 inches of width or less, and a Class 2 will be 65 or more. I'm sorry. Section 5 of the bill says a Class 1 ATV is 50 inches or less from outside rim to outside rim. Section 6 says a Class 2 ATV is 50 inches but less than 65. There's also language in this bill that will allow these Class 1 machines that were Class 2 machines that now will become in the Class 1 category to be used on the unimproved roadsides as they were Class 2 machines previously. So Section 8, Representative Moline, I know there were some constituents in your district that had bought these new machines with a roll cage and a steering wheel, thinking that they could ride them. Or Representative Metz's district, I'm sorry. Up in the northern part of the state, bought these machines thinking that they could ride them on the unimproved shoulder of the road, only to find out that they couldn't. We weren't enforcing that law, but now this clarifies that they can do that. Let me just step back here. Subdivision 4, Section 7 on the top of that page deals with that ATV language on the transfer. Section 8 I covered, talking about the right-of-way use. That carries on to the bottom, most of the page 4, I should say. Section 9 of the bill and several sections that follow are technical corrections that deal with invasive species. Rather than going from listed, we're changing to a designated process. We did this last session, said that the commissioner may designate invasive prohibited water bodies rather than list, so infested water bodies, I should say. So now we're picking up some sections of statute that we missed through that process. So rather than go through a formal listing process, we'll designate a water body as an infested water body, post it within the state register, and then this just conforms statute to deal with that process. That does carry on to page 6 and to the top of page 7. Section 15, members, provides the DNR authority that we're clarifying that we have this authority as we're doing decontamination inspections at our wayside checks and at boat ramps and things like that as delegated authorities, counties who have entered into delegated agreements with us, that we do have the authority to require decontamination, including hot water or high-pressure equipment when available, for water-related equipment transported or before it is placed into waters of the state. So basically, this would give us the authority to require a person to have their boat decontaminated before they launch it if it was deemed that it was a contaminated vessel or dock, something like that. On 7.22 to 7.27, it's also giving us the authority to tag this equipment, and you can see it, 7.24 or 7.23, an order for removal of prohibited invasive species under paragraph A, clause 1, or decontamination of water-related equipment under paragraph A, clause 5, may include tagging the water-related equipment and issuing a notice that specifies a time frame for completing the removal or decontamination and reinspection of the water-related equipment. So this would give us the authority to adhere a tag to the vessel, make sure that, give them a schedule where they could get their watercraft or water-related equipment decontaminated and how to get that re-inspected. Moving on, section 16 deals with that section again, talking about decontamination. Section 17 and 18, again, change the listing to designating. Section 19 allows us to use invasive species funds to also do habitat improvements. If there's a healthy habitat in the lake, there's less likelihood of invasive plants taking hold. So if we have a native plant community in the lake rather than a non-native plant community, those invasives won't be able to spread as quickly, so that's what we're talking about doing there. Section 20 is some language that was brought to us from the Parks and Trails Council that we support, that clarifies that This is actually in the outdoor recreation, or the state park statutes. It clarifies that if a trail is going by a state park, they may include connections to state park or recreation areas that generally lie in or between the vicinity. So we wouldn't have to come back in and seek separate authorization to provide a spur trail to, say, Bearhead Island State Park or Lake Vermilion or Cuyuna Country Rec Area, things like that. Section 21 is actually an amendment that we worked with Representative Lueck on, stating that the Camp Ripley Veterans Trail may be separated, have a separate grade for motorized and non-motorized if needed. So as acceptable as needed, there's some portions of the path that's needed. Section 22 clarifies that when we combine the name of Lake Vermilion and Sudan Underground Mine State Parks, where that permit is not required, it's not required at the underground mine tour. And also, if you've been there, I think you will be there this summer, hopefully, as you go down the hill to Stunts Bay Boat Ramp where the boathouses are, you do not need a sticker to enter that area as well. Section 23 would provide us the authority by written order to adopt temporary water surface controls at public construction and maintenance sites that cross or adjacent to waters of the state. The best example is the St. Croix River right now, St. Croix River Crossing Bridge. We've been working on establishing a no-wake zone there. As we're doing these bridge constructions, it's imperative to have a no-wake zone. Just one wake can cause that boom of that crane to go out of position, and safety is the most paramount for this situation. There is some concern from some folks. I think the Association of General Contractors have a few concerns about the softness of this language, so I'll be working with them to come up with some alternative language between now and at next hearing of this bill. Section 24 is a technical correction dealing with fire training, just changing the citation. Previously it said structural burn training procedures for Minnesota's Technical College System, and now we're tying it to this National Fire Protection Association 104 requirement there. That carries on to section 25. Now we have a large portions of the bill, members, that was something that we wanted to try to address during the unsession discussions last year, but we had to go through some legal discussions as there's one auxiliary forest remaining within the state. So we're amending and repealing a lot of the auxiliary forest language in this bill. There's one left. These changes do not impact that forest, but this was a process that we had to establish these auxiliary forests and how they would work. So actually that goes through page 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, and 22 of the bill up to the top of 23. And I do have Director Forrest Bowe here if you'd like to talk about that. Actually, it does continue down to the next page. I apologize. So the next section that deals with, not deals with that section would be section 45 on page 24, dealing with the Forrest Bowe account, not the Forrest Bough. I knew I was going to say that, not Forrest Bowe account. So we're clarifying that the funds in the Forrest Bough account can be used for special forest product information education programs, as well as educating people on the harvesting of these boughs. Section 46 deals with the change that was passed last year on a prohibition on once-through cooling, and we're clarifying that we may issue permits for systems in existence prior to that law being into effect for up to 5 million gallons annually. These are closed-loop systems that are buried in the ground. It's a very efficient way to heat or cool your home. Section 47, also there on 25.7 to 9, says that we may waive fees for past unpermitted appropriations for residential systems. These are related to those once-through cooling systems. We don't want to have to penalize somebody for coming into compliance and getting registered with us. Section 48 is just another technical correction inserting the date for use under Minnesota statutes 2014 for title examinations. Section 29 is something I've been working with, the department's been working with Representative Dill on, clarifying that the mine shaft at the Sudan Underground Mine State Park is not regulated by state elevator code, where you have to have buttons and brakes and doors that close and things like that. It's a mine shaft that is used and inspected under federal code. So the federal mine code for hoists that lift people under the Code of Federal Regulations, Title 30, Part 57, Subpart R, applies to our mine shaft at the mine, basically, is what it's saying. We have spoken with the Department of Labor Industry, and our attorneys are all in agreement this language is acceptable. And we've spoke with other committees. I believe they do not need to see that language. Section 50 relates to the changes in the ATV registration that are in the bill. We do not want to force a person to have to re-register their ATV. Rather, when you go to re-register your ATV after it expires, and if you now have one of these Class 2 or a side-by-side ATV that is 50 inches or less, it's some of the older Polaris Rangers and things that will now be a Class 1. You do that at the time of your expiration, rather than spend the money to send out notices, make people come in and get a new sticker. I mean, we'll manage through this over the next period, the next 3 years. So it just makes sense to do that, and it provides us that authority to deal with that change there. Revises instructions, you can see that's related to the specific pieces there. And I apologize, you do not have these specific repealers in front of you. Maybe council could cover the repealers that are in the bill? Or I might be able to pull them up real quickly.
Mr. Chair, maybe while Ms. Taylor's looking to walk through the repealers, the one point of contention I think that's still being worked on in the bill, and Commissioner Meyer mentioned it, Section 23, and Ms. Burnett from the Builders is here, but I don't know if you need her to testify, Mr. Chair. She's working with the department, and they promised me they'll have it worked out when the bill gets before my committee. So I know she's right behind me, but I think she's probably just nodding yes, if I'm not mistaken.
I think we'll be fine, Representative McNamara.
Thank you.
Taylor?
Mr. Chair, members, if members are interested, if you go to the initial original bill, House File 1329, instead of the DE amendment, you'll see the repealed language at the end. And it looks like the sections that are being repealed are regarding the auxiliary forests. It looks like all of them are.
Mr. Chairman, members, yes, it would be the restrictions on new auxiliary forest tax rates, special taxes, and place in auxiliary forest by purchasers. So that is the bill.
Representative McNamara, can we move to questions?
Yep, or we can just vote.
We've got a couple of amendments yet, too. Questions, members? Representative Meza?
I'll pass it on.
Okay. Why don't we take the amendments? Oh, I'm sorry, Representative Dill.
Okay, that's no problem.
Representative Dill.
Busy reading quickly. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right.
Line 10.27 in the bill regarding prohibited activities, regarding watercraft. Number 3 on line 10.27 would present a problem for a lot of lakes.
Mr. Chair, you have the,
Are we on the bill?
Well, I'm looking
Bill or
at
in the amendment?
I'm looking at the bill. I couldn't find that same language in the amendment.
Okay.
Mine is upside down, right side up, and so I
Mr.
was,
Chairman, Representative Dill, I believe if you go to 9.9.
okay, I've got,
the
Are
delete all?
you talking about the construction area restrictions?
no. In the bill itself, because my amendment is upside down, right side up, different pages, and so it's not in order. It was under prohibited activities. And the old language said prohibited night skiing or towing prohibited. So where would that be in the delete all?
Mr.
You know?
Mr. Chairman, that language is actually going to be in the game and fish delete all because of the government relate.
We took that out of the bill.
State and local government.
Okay, well, I had a problem with that because, I mean, if you're up at Voyagers Park, you're towing.
Later tonight, we can talk about
All
that.
the time. Got it. Sorry to bother you. Too many things at
No,
once.
it's all right. Members, I think we'll take the amendments now, if it's okay with you. Oh, we have Representative Russo?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On page 24, section 46
Of the delete all.
of the delete all. Just want to clarify, as you were describing this, we're talking about once through uses of cooling water, but then you said something about a closed loop system, so that confused me. So,
Commissioner Meyer?
Chairman, Representative Russo, yes, and I apologize for that. The prohibition is on once-through water permits. There was the bill that passed last year that exempted once-through cooling systems, or these pump and dump systems that are there. You can see the language that we're saying. The language I was referring to is actually on 24.29. It says that we may issue once-through system use permits on an annual basis for groundwater thermal exchange devices or aquifer storage and recovery systems. So these are not, in our minds, once-through cooling systems, but they're more of a closed-loop system.
Representative Russo?
Yeah, they're sort of closed, sort of not.
Well, they are.
Okay, yeah, I wanted to make sure I understood you properly. Do we have any concerns about the the heat that it's picked up, being dumped back into the aquifer? Are there any repercussions of that people are going to worry about?
Commissioner Meyer.
Chair, Representative Russo, I can forward you some other additional information. I'm not sure if I have anybody from our
Well,
waters
Representative
division
Russo,
here.
this is just a closed-loop system. It
This-
stays in the system.
This water wouldn't be going back into the aquifer?
No. Representative Russo.
Well, on line 24.30, it says that return all once-through system water to the source aquifer.
Or aquifer storage and recovery systems that return, we could, let me pull together staff, technical staff. I don't have that information right now. That's not the intent. We would have concerns about water being pulled out of the aquifer,
Yep.
being circulated and deposited back again for health and safety purposes.
Okay, thanks.
Members, we have a couple of amendments I'd like to move at this time. There's one, I'll move the A3 amendment. This is a bill that I will be carrying, and we're going to be hearing it next week, but I'd like to put it in this bill. I think this comes from the four-wheel drive truck folks, and I believe they've been working with the DNR to put this together. They're going to be spending some money from their dedicated account to try to develop some trails. And I believe the user groups are okay with it, the DNR is okay with it. I think it's a good thing that we do this. So I would move the A3 amendment and take questions. Representative Mehta.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was just going to say, I hope we can find some matching funds in legacy.
Okay. With that, I'll move the A3 amendment. All in favor of that amendment signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, motion prevails. The amendment is adopted. Now on the A15-0195 amendment. Is Mr. Bone in the audience? Ray, would you come down? This is some language I'm going to have a bill on as well. Traditionally, we put some of these ATV issues and off-road issues in the policy bill. And welcome to the committee. Please state your name and who you represent for the record and explain my amendment.
Mr. Chairman, Ray Bone. I'm here representing the All-Terrain Vehicle Association of Minnesota. I have the president of the All-Terrain Vehicle Association with me as well, and I'll let him introduce himself.
Okay. Welcome to the committee.
Mr. Chair, George Radke, the president of the All-Terrain Vehicle Association of Minnesota. Glad to be here.
Thank you for coming. Who's going to explain the amendment?
George. Go ahead, start. Okay, I can. The first provision, Section 8, what we're running into is, as you know, if we're on a trail, designated trail, and if we're with the family, and a lot of our folks ride as families, what happens is if they go off the trail and try to go into like a small town to have a hamburger and a Coke or something, if they have someone who's between 12 and 15 that doesn't have their driver's license, it's okay for them to ride on the trail, but once they get off the trail and they go into the municipality, we have COs that are ticketing them because the law doesn't allow it. So what this provision does is allow that, and again, as long as they're accompanied by an adult, that's the key, then they'll be able to do that. That's what we're trying to accomplish here. And George can talk about some of the experiences he's had.
With one of the biggest things is as you are riding with your family, as you come in and you need to get gas or it's time to eat dinner, basically you've got a town sitting in front of you that you can't get there. So you end up literally turning back around again or trying to find other ways to actually get into town, and or inadvertently too many people are doing just exactly what Ray had mentioned. They're going anyway and breaking the law. Typically though, they're with their families, they're supervised, and that's the big key part of this for us as well too, is that we don't want to turn the streets open to kids by any means, but they need to be with a supervising adult.
Representative Russo.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So what kind of speeds would we be talking about the vehicles being operated at?
Mr. Radke.
Mr. Chair,
Use Russo.
Representative Yuso.
Russo.
What we're talking about is what would be dictated by the local authority.
Representative Russo, in a lot of these communities that are located next to some of these trails, they pass resolutions to allow ATVs in their town on the public roads, and they have to abide by those speed limits.
So
Representative Russo.
I have some misgivings about this because we would not allow a 12-year-old to be behind the wheel of a car operating within the traffic rules of the city with the parents sitting right next to them.
Mr.
And
Chairman?
if you're operating at similar speeds, it's not as big a vehicle, granted, but if you're operating at similar speeds, we would not allow a 12-year-old on the city streets with a parent sitting within reach of the steering wheel. And this can't provide a greater level of supervision than that, because you're not on the same vehicle. So I understand why you would want to do this. I get the motivation behind it. But the public roads are the public roads, and it's a different deal. And people have an expectation, the other people that use those roads have an expectation of safety, including pedestrians, little kids, so little kids on bicycles and whatnot. And I don't know why we would do that when we wouldn't let someone between the ages of 12 and 16 do that, as I said, 15, excuse me, with the parents sitting right there. So I don't like this part. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Russo, I think, these are people that, or kids that are certified. They're trained, they're certified on the actual vehicle itself, and we have an extremely good track record with those kids that are certified. And we right, and Representative McNamara makes a very good point. These machines are tailored to fit the kid, and typically they have a lot of riding experience because they are supervised. One of the key elements is the supervision. We believe that's critically important. We would never, ever approach you to do something like this unless they were supervised. Supervision, goes a long, long ways, and I think if you talk to the conservation officers, they would tell you the same thing. When we see kids that are unsupervised, that are out in these road ditches riding 2 or 3 on the vehicle, or even unsupervised riding around Grandpa's farm, that's you're just inviting disaster. But when their parents are there, I don't think there's any safer way you could do it, frankly. And one of the benefits to this are the communities that are out there, because this is going to preclude them from coming in and having dinner with, the family comes in, has dinner, drops $50, $60 for dinner. This is precluding that if we don't do this.
Representative Russo.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I get that. And certainly it's better with supervision than without supervision, but we would not allow the same thing with supervision if you put a box around this thing and call it a car. It wouldn't be allowed. And, these kids have had safety training and all of that, and, and a 15-year-old has all that safety training and everything before they turn 16 and we let them get a license.
Mr. Chairman.
So I'm, if we could, I understand that they've passed the ordinances to allow them, so they've declared them roadworthy and whatnot. But this is not a little motorized scooter. So it concerns me. And, there has to be another way for the family to park the vehicle and get across the road to the hamburger stand or what, wherever they're going, the restaurant and whatnot. So I'm okay with the sides of the roads, and the supervision is really, really critical to that, as you mentioned. But when it comes to a town road, it's kind of a different thing. So I guess if a town really would like to enable families to participate in their attractions, the town can find a way to provide some kind of corridor or something. But 12-year-olds on the city streets with a motorized vehicle, I'm not okay with.
Representative Mesa.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. They purchase gas for these vehicles to move, don't they? In my mind, a gas tax should enable them to be on the roads anywhere. They're paying for it, it's a usage, and I actually have the opposite perspective. I hope that we can work to include two-wheeled all-terrain vehicles, dirt bikes, other things. I've been having some problems in one of my communities with ticketing in regard to that, and there are no other ways to get around. And I grew up with a bunch of fun kids, and we tooled around all over. Young kid, no difference to me, being on a lawnmower with a little summer business, riding lawnmower. I mean, where do we draw the line? In my mind, I think it's a good bill. I'd like to see it expanded a little bit to include some other modes of transportation that aren't just the ATVs.
Representative Considine.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The testifiers keep referring to the fact that these are family activities in parental supervision, but that's not what the bill says. The bill is any 18-year-old. And I guess I would be accompanied by a person 18 years old or older that holds a valid driver's license. I guess I'd be a lot more comfortable if it was parent or legal guardian.
Representative Anzel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members, we don't need corridors. We don't need any highfalutin system here. What we need is some relief for our conservation officers who are upholding the law. And we need to give both the conservation officers and people who ride ATVs on trails some clarity here. That's all we're attempting to do here. You got 4, 5, 6, 22 machines coming into a small town in northern Minnesota, and there's 2 cafes. This is a big deal for this community, and it's a big deal for the quality of the ride for the people. All we want to do is allow young people who are trained, who are supervised, to ride their machine the extra 3 blocks to get to the cafe, to have a Coke and a hamburger. It's no big deal here, and please don't make more of this than what it is.
Thank you. Anyone else in the audience like to speak for or against the amendment? Seeing none, the chair will renew his motion that the A15015 amendment be passed. I'm going to incorporate in my amendment that we delete everything after 2.32. Everything after line 2.32 would cause the bill to go to another committee, and we don't want that to happen. We've taken a number of issues out of this bill to try to avoid that issue. So I'm going to incorporate that into my amendment. Oh, except for line 3.12 and 3.13. Everything except those 2 lines. Understand the amendment? As amendment.
Representative Hackworth, you don't need that? Do you want that in?
We'd like to have that in the bill, Representative McNamara, but that would cause it to go to government operations, and we don't want that to happen. That's another policy committee that we can't make the deadline.
Okay, Representative Hackworth, do we have the option of putting that in the game and fish bill? Because doesn't that have
That's correct.
already on top of that? All right,
That's
thank you.
Okay.
I support deleting that language.
All in favor of that motion signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion prevails. The amendment is adopted.
Mr. Chairman, if I may have the
Commissioner.
opportunity, I did not have a chance to review the A3 before it was adopted. This language does have some concern to the department, let alone the 2016 base funding changes, which I believe will be discussed in Representative McNamara's committee in the biennial budget. But talking about 60 days after the application has been locally approved and submitted, some of these trail corridors require environmental review. I think you may or may not have an amendment to deal with some of those things, but these larger truck trails can be pretty complicated and take some time to do. So by saying that if the application is not approved denied or approved within 60 days, I think you're just forcing the commissioner to deny more applications rather than take the time it needs to actually work through these processes. So we need to discuss that. And the funding, though I understand the concerns, taking $150,000 out of the enforcement-based budget for OHV enforcement, I don't think is the right way to go. So I know that's not the purview of this committee, but I wanted to get on the record that we do have concerns about the amendment. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
We can discuss that in Representative McNamara's committee, and when we hear the bill next week, we'll hear it separately as well. Okay, any further discussion to the bill? On the bill as amended. Anyone in the audience have any other discussion to the bill as amended? Hearing none, Representative McNamara renews his motion that House File 1329 be re-referred to his committee on Environment, Policy, and Finance as amended. All in favor of that motion signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion prevails. Bill is passed. To your committee, Representative McNamara, and thank you. Okay, next, Representative Dill. Do we have an amendment? Ms. Lewis, would you like to come up? Representative Dill moves House File 1429. This is a bill that the Land Subcommittee put together, and Representative Dill is the author. Representative Dill moves House File 1429 and recommends that it be re-referred to the Committee on Environment, Policy, and Finance.
Okay,
Representative Dill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And because this bill has not left the committee, and we were a division, or a subcommittee, I should say, there is in your packet, the DE2 amendment, which we adopted last night and brought into this amendment. So it's actually House File 1429 as amended with the DE2, which is in your packet. And included in the DE2 members are House File 138, which is Sundin, House File 214, which is Purcell, 295, which is Sundin, 447, which is Lueck, 547, which is Pulowski, 816, which is Dill, 1082, which is Schoen, 1309, Gunther, 1650, Dill, and 322, Senate File 322, which is Goodhue County. And so if you took the names and bill numbers and looked at the 1429 as amended by the DE2, you would find all of those bills in the bill before us now. Now, Ms. Lewis is with us, and it's been normal procedure over the years, whether I've been in the majority or the party opposite has been in the majority, that we always had a land bill, at least until it got to the House floor, that was agreed upon by the members and by the appropriate state agencies, such as in this case, all of these are affected by DNR. But we have had bills in the past that where it was a MnDOT issue, and someone from MnDOT came up and talked about whether they approved or whether they didn't approve. And we've always only taken the non-controversial or where there was peace in the valley on the bills, and that's what we have before us. And I'd ask, Ms. Chairman, if you give me the latitude to ask Ms. Lewis publicly at this time if in fact, she has reviewed all the bills that I wrote off and that are and included in the DE amendment to the 1429 if they're all acceptable to the department.
Ms. Lewis?
Mr. Chair, for the record, Kathy Lewis, Assistant Director, Lands and Minerals, DNR. The DNR has reviewed the bills that were included in the DE2 amendment and has no concerns about the bills.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Dill, the DE2 amendment is part of the House File 1429 at this time.
That is correct, thank you. So then, Mr. Chairman, as always happens, we always have bills that come in after the deadline, whether it's on May, the last day of adjournment, or the date that was set here to get all your bills in. It's just a normal thing, and you will see this as we go along in the process about people coming in, and you'll see it in the next committee that's going to in Ways and Means, and then on the House floor, and all of those things. On the House floor, there might be a controversial amendment that we discuss that isn't agreed to by an agency and by the members. But we do have two so-called latecomers today that I would like to propose to add into the 1429 as amended. And the first one is the one from up in my district, which is Lake County, and it is to amend the delete everything amendment, and it is coded A150197. And is that in everyone's possession in the committee?
It is.
Okay, this is a Lake County amendment, and I would ask, Mr. Chairman, if I might have the latitude if Ms. Lewis has any comments on this amendment.
Representative Dill, I think the 0197 is the Dakota County one.
Yep, that's Dakota. I've got to do Lake. Okay, I'm sorry. It is the A150184.
Correct.
Yep, I'm sorry.
And Ms. Lewis, you give it the blessing?
Mr. Chair, the DNR has been working with the county on the parcels included in this amendment. It's part of a data center proposal, and we have worked out an agreement with the county, and the bill reflects the agreement worked with the county. So the DNR supports the amendment.
Okay. All in favor of the amendment, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, motion fails. The amendment is adopted. Representative Dill.
Thank you. And now to the A150197, which is the Dakota County
Representative Dill, do you want to move that amendment, or does Representative McNamara want to move it? Representative McNamara.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This, and Representative Dill, you laid it out very well. It came to me in the last hour. Ms. Lewis has been gracious enough to look at it and look at it with the chair. I think it is to the point of being non-controversial, but I have promised Ms. Lewis, if it's not right, that I'll take it out in either one of the next two stops if she tells me it doesn't have her blessing. But I believe, Mr. Chair, I mean, Dakota County's here if you want, but it's really non-controversial. It was a middle of a road that got titled incorrectly, and I think it should be non-controversial.
Ms. Lewis?
Mr. Chair, that's correct. We did not see this amendment before we came to the hearing today. The information provided by the county makes sense. Does not appear to be a controversial issue. It doesn't appear to border water. If all that checks out, we'll go back and check that out. If all that checks out, we are fine with the bill.
Very good. If there any issues do develop with this particular issue, please bring it to our attention so we can take it out of the bill. That's kind of the agreement that we've got. So thank you for that. All in favor of the 0197 amendment signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, motion prevails. Amendment is adopted. Anything further, Representative Dill?
No, Mr. Chairman, unless another member of the committee has another amendment that they would like to offer to the bill, I'm ready to move the 1490.
Amendments. Anyone else have any questions, comments? Anyone in the audience like to speak for or against the lands bill? Seeing none, Representative Dill renews his motion that House File 1429 as amended be re-referred to the committee, the Environment Committee on Policy and Finance. All in favor of that motion signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, motion prevails. The bill is passed. Members, I think that concludes our business for now. We will be coming back at 6:15 this evening to do the Game and Fish bill. We will be the 300 South. The committee hearing will be in 300 South at 6:15. Any other comments? We are in recess.